What's up, everybody? It's Reggie Williams, founder and CEO of Ambrosia for Heads. And with me, I have Jake Payne, our editor in chief. And together, this is our What's the Headline podcast. We got a very special guest with us, rapper Big Pooh. What's going on, man?
Nothing much, man. Just moving, grooving, trying to stay winning, not losing.
Yeah. Where are you located these days? You in NC or where are you?
Yeah, I'm in NC. I'm in Charlotte, NC.
Okay,
We
cool.
inside of my disheveled music room at the current moment. I've been a lot of in and out since the beginning of August, so things are kind of everywhere.
Yeah. And you glad to be back? Are you back out and about in full or still like creeping your way back in?
Nah, it's been full, man. I've been to Europe. I've been to different states. I fly to Phoenix on Saturday. I've been all over the place working on this documentary, this little brother documentary. So I'm back outside, like outside never closed down.
Oh, that's dope. That's dope. Definitely want to get into the documentary, but first we got to talk about your new album, To Dream in Color, out now. I've been listening to it, man. As soon as I heard it, I was like, yo, I definitely want to talk to Pooh because there's great content, great substance on this.
Thank you.
Obviously, the music is there, but and you've been doing this for years, man. Like, I'm a fan. I've been a fan for a long time, both little brother stuff and solo stuff. And one of the things I appreciate most is your content.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's important, man. You know, it's so easy to not be yourself these days. That you have to really make a certain effort to be you. And I like being me. I like telling my story.
It's funny you say that because on Dreaming in Color, the first song, you say, and I think this is your grandmother who used to tell you, no matter where you go, remember who you are.
Absolutely.
Is that right? Okay.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's yeah. My grandmother, rest in peace, Rosie Collins. Very forward thinking for someone that was born in 1940. She was the person who told me that school isn't for everybody. She was the person that when I came home with tattoos and my ears pierced, it didn't, she wasn't taken aback by it. She was actually happy for me. And, just as long as I was doing something honest and legal, so, my grandmother, man, she meant a lot to me. And like I said, she was one of them people, she encouraged me to travel, and so just I wanted to, pay homage to her, as I kicked off this album.
That's amazing. So what are some of the other things you learned from her?
Just things like, gardening, even though I can't garden to save my life. She was a gardener. She's just very, very life oriented, man. Just, she's about pursuing your dreams and, you being happy and finding out who you are, not who people tell you are, but you going out and finding out who you are for yourself. And she encouraged that. And that's something that I didn't know I was setting out to do, but I set out to do when I went to school.
It's interesting, being your grandmother, that's, I guess, 3 generations removed from you. And you have a line in that same song, To Dream in Color, where you say, 3 generations deep, we never see no real money, used to dream I would break the cycle. And that song is heavy and it's complex because on one hand you're talking those affirmative lines of like knowing who you are, but on the other it deals, like the lyrics also deal with loss and disappointment. And you say used to, as if that dream had paused or possibly died altogether. But the song ends with affirmation too, and the fact that you are going to make it. So that's a complex headspace. Can you speak to that idea a little bit of just where you were in writing that song mentally?
Yeah. Just thinking back when I was in high school, that's kind of where I went. And just thinking about not really knowing what I wanted to be, or what I wanted to do when I grew up, and still not really knowing, even as I went away to college and even as I began this career in music, still not really knowing who I was or what I wanted to be. You know, a lot of people, I know for a lot of people, they say, yo, this all I ever wanted to do, ever wanted to be, but that wasn't it for me. I kind of fell into this. I always had a love for music and I always had a love for writing, but I kind of fell into being an artist in a group. And like it all happened. It was a whirlwind for me. And so for me, the things that I wanted to do, I still want to do some of them. I've been able to do a few, but still want to break generational cycles or curses. Still want to do things that I promised myself I would do, you know, for my mother. You know, when I went away to school, once again, these are things I wanted to do even when I thought I was going to be a teacher. So so that's kind of what that song was, just understanding, even though I didn't grow up without, so to speak, I still saw we were without, you know, without a doubt. But you know, I told my mom the other day, I told her it's not like we, you know, were in the best position, but you made sure we didn't feel like we were ever less than anybody, no matter what you had to do. And that's kind of what that song represented, was just me seeing or understanding things weren't, you know, all, you know, silver spoonish, and wanting to do something about that, and but not knowing how I was going to do it, how I was going to get to that destination, but knowing where I wanted to go though.
Mm. You say you fell into it. You know, a lot of people are like beating their head against walls trying to get in. So how did you fall into it?
Man, I just being in the right place at the right time. It's divine timing. You know, I say in one of them songs, I can't remember. I think it's God's Grace. You know, I thought I was headed down to ODU, plans changed in CCU.
Mm-hmm.
Come along for the ride. And that's like literally within a week, I went from going to Old Dominion University to going down to North Carolina Central. Never seen Central, never heard of Central, never been to Durham. The only thing I knew about Durham was the Durham Bulls movie. And I'm in Durham, North Carolina, in Duke. And then I'm in Durham, North Carolina at a school I didn't even consider. It was never on my radar. And that was God's timing. You know what I mean? I stayed in a Marriott hotel for half of my first semester on campus. Wow. And because dorms weren't ready, they didn't have enough dorms for all the students that had enrolled. And so when I finally got on campus, I ended up being on the hallway where I had 4 RAs, and 3 of them RAs became, or 2 of them RAs became, or 3 of them became really, really, really good friends, right? One of them ended up being a groomsman in my wedding. But the RA room who I went in, I just happened to be in there one day, and we're talking music, and Phonte walks in. Mm-hmm. And I meet Phonte. And so just how things came together, even how Little Brother came together, you know, a few months before, Tay told me, you know, he didn't see us as a duo. And I end up coming, you know, going down to Charlotte, working on myself, working on things that he pointed out that I need to work on. Was coming back over the summer recording, happened to be at the studio the day Phonte, Median, and Ninth was supposed to record a song, and Median didn't show up. And that song was Speed. So the divine timing, man, all this was divine timing for me. That's when I say I fell into it. You know what I'm saying? I was at the right place at the right time every time.
That's dope. That's dope.
Yeah.
You know, so on Changing Again, you talk about the cost of doing business with no OGs. You know, that line hit me. Now, so what types of wisdom would you have passed down to artists who have come after you?
A lot, man. First, please, you gotta have a good idea who you are. If you don't have a good idea who you are in this business, people can set you up to be anything they need you to be, you know, most of the time for their benefit. You knowing who you are or having an idea who you are, at least your values and your morals will prevent you from being taken advantage of. Understanding who you want to be, even if you're not there yet, allows you to stand your ground, when somebody's asking you to do some silly shit. You know what I'm saying? So those are the first things. When I work with young guys, we have conversations about what their goals are. It's not about what I want. It's about what they want, what they see for themselves. And then I challenge them on certain things. Like, do you really want this, or do you want this because somebody told you you're supposed to have it this way? And we have those conversations. I think people may believe, when I work with guys, it's like, oh, you trying to mold people to be like you or have the career you have. Hell nah. I want them to be light years ahead of me. You know what I'm saying? I want them to be more than I ever could have been. It doesn't matter what type of music you make. It doesn't, that doesn't matter to me. It's, do you have talent? Do you have work ethic? Do you want to continue to work at your craft? None of us are in our final form. We're all still learning. And so all those things are important to me as I'm working with an artist. And, we just have conversations about life, because knowing what they want out of life kind of tells me what they really want out of their career without them having to spell it out for me.
Mm. It's interesting you say that about not trying to make them into one mold, and especially not molding them after yourself. Because you also talk about on that song, labels being one big gang with different factions. Can you talk more about that? Were you hearing the same things from everyone else? Were they trying to make you guys into something that you weren't?
Not necessarily trying to make us into something we weren't, but after you talk to, different labels or so many labels, you start to notice you're hearing the same things, just from different faces, different voices. And, a lot of the processes are similar. A lot of the fluff is similar. And, you just start to learn, like, okay, this may say this label may be called this label may be called that, but at the end of the day, y'all all pretty much the same. Like, it's not really a big difference. It's the people. It's about the people that work at the label. And I'm not talking about the president and the vice president. I'm talking about the project managers, the, people of that ilk, the A&Rs. What type of people are they really determines the type of label it is. But at the top, they're all the same. And when you're taking the meetings, you're normally meeting with people at the top. You're not meeting with the project managers, the A&Rs, and them folks. So you kind of, a lot of times once they get to that point, they're pretty much machines. You know what I mean? And they're kicking the same spiel. They just got a different label on their name tag. And that's kind of what that represented. And I found that out. I learned that quickly. I was 23, 24 years old, and we're taking these meetings. And, I said, we meeting with Tom Wiley, we meeting with Peter Thiel, we meeting with, Chris Lighty, we're meeting with these people. And I'm just like, man, yeah, like, okay, a lot of this is the same. It's just a different name on the building. Okay. At that point, it's just like, who do I trust more to follow through? And like I said in the song, we wanted to roll with Jive because of Chris Lighty. We understood his pedigree. We knew where he came from. He understood who we were and where we came from. And it just made too much sense.
But it was, and you say in the song too, it was ultimately another party that wanted to retain the masters.
Yeah. It was at the end of the day, it was up to Benny B. We were signed to ABB, and he had the choice. He had the final say. So although we were taking these meetings, he got to pretty much decide where we went. And for him, Jive was out because Jive wanted to clear the samples and reissue the listening, which meant he no longer owned it. And he wasn't giving that up. And then Atlantic also allowed him to retain vinyl rights to whatever projects we put out through Atlantic, as long as he was a part of them. So he went with the best business decision for him, and that was to go towards Atlantic.
Well, and shout out to you guys for getting the album back. And I know I can't imagine how much that means to you, but I know with Jay-Z getting Reasonable Doubt, like to own your first has to be a special feeling.
Absolutely. You know, and at the end of the day, I mean, you want your first. I mean, I would love to have had the money I was owed as well.
Yeah.
But to have the album, I can go make my own money off the album. So that meant a lot. I mean, for us, you know, we went on that campaign, and you know, I know a lot of people were probably like, oh, just go get a lawyer, go do this. Like, man, we had all that. Like, sometimes you got to make a little bit more noise, and us making that noise allowed us to, at this point, we own everything except for the minstrel show. So that campaign, we was on the cleanup campaign. A lot of what we did was quiet. But we just had to get loud when it came to getting back to listening.
What's so interesting to me is, you know, I listened to this album, To Dream in Color, multiple times, probably 10 times before I read something that a lot of these recordings were actually, you know, we're talking about Babies, they started 6 years ago. You had begun kind of recording some demos in 2006. Can you speak about the process of revisiting something and deciding that, okay, now's the time?
Well, the actual songs weren't from 2006.
16, I'm sorry.
I mean, 2016, the idea for the album was from 2016. I actually started completely over. So all those songs that I started in 2016, I still have them. I didn't use none of the lyrics. I didn't use none of the beats. But I think starting over allowed me to approach the album in the proper way. Going back and listening to them songs, they're good songs, but I think the time, the maturity, the distance allowed me a different perspective where I could see the lessons in some of them things I was going through, versus when it's still fresh. You don't understand, you know, the lessons or the lesson to be learned from something. So what ended up happening for me was I started to understand, you know, so like when I made LS 400, that was a song about confidence. When I made One Day in NY, that was a song about anxiety, performance anxiety. You know, so I started to understand more of what I was writing about versus just writing. And I think that's kind of what taking that time did for me. And also I'm a better writer. Like I improve. So from 2016 to 2021, 2022, I'm a much better writer. So I was able to really write better songs because of that time that it took me from when I started the idea to when I actually decided to complete it.
You say you're a much better writer in 2022. Why is that? What happened over those 6 years that helped to develop your writing?
A few things. Well, one, life, but two, when I did RPM with Focus, you know, I always said, and I told Focus this, that was, without that album, you don't have the version of me that ended up on Made a Lord Watch. I was in a rut, and what Focus did to get me out of that rut, I don't even know if he knew I was in a rut, but what he did to get me out of that rut was he gave me different challenges on that album. And what those challenges did was it forced me to approach song writing differently than just sitting down, hearing the beat, and attacking it. Like, I had to think about the challenge as opposed to just attacking the beat. One of them songs on RPM, I didn't even write to a beat. Like, I wrote to a click track. So that helped me approach songs differently. And then when we got into Made a Lord Watch, Phonte told me a story that the late Rich, shoot, man, what was the manager's with the Roots manager
No,
name?
Rich Nichols.
Rich Nichols. Forgive me, forgot his last name, but the late Rich Nichols. When Fonte was doing Roots, was recording with the Roots, doing sessions with him, Rich Nichols told him something about writing, and he was like, I like to see what a MC wrote, because these are works of art. This is literature, and I like to read it, and that lets me know if it's really good or not when I can read it. And I've really thought about that. Like, that really resonated with me and hit home, and it forced me to really think about what I was doing as pieces of literature versus writing raps. And that's how I approached things on Made a Little Watch, and that's how I approached things on To Dream in Color.
That's so interesting. Well, first of all, I work with Tay at QLS in addition to, my duties here. And I was so happy to watch you guys, as somebody who had interviewed you both together, to come back together for May the Lord Watch. And you speak about it on Surround Sound. But I know after the passing of Fife, compelled you to pick up the phone and speak, both of you.
Mhm.
And it's interesting that you mentioned Fife as we talk about improvement. Back in 2016, Ambrosia for Heads, we did a 25th anniversary retrospective of Low End Theory. And a lot of hip hop heads know that that's the album where Fife went from, somebody who was very much part of Tribe, but figuring himself out, to arguably being the best MC on that particular album, all respect due to Tip. And, I think you did something very similar in Minstrel Show, and you talked about it. I mean, there's songs on there like The End of Watch Me and Sincerely Yours and Still Lives Through. And you just speak about improving right now. I'm curious, like, what's the process like when you're in a rut, like you're talking about, and going in and getting those reps in and coming back razor sharp?
Man, it's like going to the gym and putting up shots. For me, my motto has always been, I wanted people to hear the improvement each time they heard me. So if you heard me today, if I give you something tomorrow, I want to be better than I was the day before. And that's very important to me. So, even though I was in a rut, like, the thing about it, even though I was in a rut, like, I'm always working, right? I'm always doing things, even if it's in my head. I got little notes, little voice recordings. So I'm always working and always crafting, but the process of putting together full songs or full albums, I just wasn't doing, because I just wasn't motivated. So for me, I think I'm always practicing some way. I may not be putting up shots. I may be doing defensive slides. I may be, working on my passing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm always doing something, just because it's like I want to beat the man in the mirror more than I'm focused on beating anybody else. I want to listen to old records and cringe because I'm hearing things that I could have done better. Even though I didn't know any better at the time, I want to be able to do that when I listen to records. And if I can't do that, then I'm not progressing. I'm not improving. So that's just a mentality I've always had since the beginning. And I try to keep it, whether I'm going through a rut, downtime, whatever you want to call it. I still think about ways of improving. Like, even now, like, I can listen to Dream in Color, and I believe that's my best work to date, but it's still things that I want to improve on that I feel I didn't do necessarily on that album.
Well, the album is super tight. It's 10 songs, 30 minutes. There's no fat on it at all. So was that a conscious decision to keep it short, or just the way things turned out?
It's kind of how they turned out. I had a couple other tracks planned and do the different things. It just didn't work out, but I had another beat that I loved, that I just couldn't figure out what I wanted to do with it. And at that point, I knew I was done. Like, I knew I had exhausted all the ideas that I had for this album, and there was no more ideas to come. So that's when I said, okay, time to put the pen down and start working on post.
Hmm.
And shout out to Fonte. He came in to sequence the album for me. It was funny. I had, idea of a sequence that I wanted, and I didn't tell him. I just told him what I wanted to be first and what I wanted to be last. And when he sent it back, it was totally, completely different from what I would have, put. And so we talked about it, and I asked him. I said, "Yeah, man, I was thinking more chronological, kind of how the songs play out." And he said, "Nah." He said, "The music tells you where to put it. Chronologically, it doesn't matter. It's the musical idea that matters." And when I heard his sequence, I was like, this is perfect. Even though it wasn't what I had thought in my mind, it was still perfect the way everything flowed into each other. And that's something Tay and I have gotten a lot better at. Or one of the things Tay and I have gotten a lot better at is being efficient. We're very efficient when we record. It's not a lot of fat. We don't do fat. We don't do practice shots. We shoot, aim and shoot to kill. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, on this one, it was 2 other tracks that I had wanted to add that I just couldn't get finished for different reasons, but it still would have sounded just as tight, with those 2 other records as it does with the 10. You don't miss it, obviously, because you don't even know what they are or what they would have been, but it still feels like a complete idea. And that was the whole point, was I just want my albums to sound like a complete idea, whether that's 10 tracks, 12 tracks, 15 tracks, 13 tracks, it doesn't matter. As long as the idea is complete, then the project is complete.
So that's always fascinating to me, how albums are sequenced. So when you say you let the music dictate it, are you talking BPMs? You talking keys? You talking the lyrical content? Like, what is it that dictates, one song follows another?
I can't speak for Fonte, but for me, typically when I sequence, it's a feeling. It's what feels right. Like what song feels right following the previous song. And I take the same approach with a show. As I'm putting my show together, it's about what feels right. Like, how do I want the show to flow? And does this fit the feeling that I have for the show? And that's kind of how I judge it typically. This album was a little different for me because I was hearing it in chronological order. So it would have started with Dreaming in Color, and then I would have went into God's Grace, because that's kind of me at the beginning. And then, so I would have had it kind of in that order. Because I didn't want it. I was like, man, it's gonna be weird if you got, this song about, if you take the current order, it's like this song about me meeting with labels, and then 3 songs later, you got this song about me growing up. And then, like, I always felt, I thought that would feel weird. Whereas Tay just took the approach that we typically take, and that's letting the feel of the music decide what flows into the next song versus worrying about the content and what I'm talking about. So I was like, well, shit, if it turns it into a Quentin Tarantino flick, you know what I'm saying? the story is there. It's just out of order.
Yeah. You ever resequence albums by other artists, like, that you just like?
No, I don't get into resequencing albums. I like to hear it how they present it. Especially if the artist is giving me, if it's a I don't want to say vibe, if it's a concept, I kind of take it for what it is, because they have it that way for a reason, and I want to listen to it the way that that it was presented to me. And I kind of leave it at that. I don't do a lot of resequencing.
I'm the same way. Reggie likes to play God and remix them all,
Yeah, I don't get into that. I just I consume it the way it was presented to me, and I can always hit that skip button if need to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So on this album, Thoughts and Prayers, which is on the Ambrosia for Heads playlist right now, is really, I think, for Reggie and I both, one of our favorite songs. individually. And in it, you know, you weigh peace against prosperity.
Mhm.
And I want to ask you, you know, which of those is more valuable to you today, or are they hand in hand?
Peace.
Mm.
I want my peace. What good is all the riches in the world if you ain't got peace? um, and you know that song. The funny thing about that song, I know, even I was like, man, this doesn't even really fit the theme of what I'm doing here. But it was just something that was on my mind and heart when I started working on it, and um, it was just one of them songs where I really was just like, man, I'm every time a tragedy happens, somebody say thoughts and prayers. And it's like that really don't do shit. Like, what does that do? That doesn't do anything. And so that was my thing. It was just like, what do I pray for? You know, and these are the things I pray for. And yeah, that was just I just wanted to vent, and that's how that track came about. Like, it wasn't really no rhyme or reason to it. It was just me venting. And I thought about putting the second verse on there, and like I did the first where everything was pray, pray, pray. I was gonna do that with thoughts, but I was like, yeah, that's gonna be overkill.
I like though that in the chorus you kind of weaponize thoughts and prayers, and you know I think we see a lot of that sentiment in the news, especially on issues pertaining to injustice and gun violence. Of like, I'm not really going to do anything, but I'm going to give you thoughts and prayers.
Right.
In writing at least the chorus part of it, I know you said you had the concept. Was there like a moment where you're like, oh, this I'm fed up, I've had enough, this is my chorus, and this is the moment why?
Yeah, I mean, so when I gave it to my DJ Skills, who did the cuts on there, when I went and played it for him, I said, look, man, this the joint. It's gonna be an interlude. I want you to go crazy. I want you to use my vocals from the song. The thing was, I didn't tell him which parts to use. I just right after my verse, I had that idea. I was like, thoughts and prayer. Like, I had that idea. The rest of that was all him. Like,
Okay.
when I got it back, I was like, oh shit, like, okay. Like, you really went crazy with it. And yeah, it was just that thing of, like you said, like, that's why I ended it the way I ended it. It's like, yeah, I just said all of this stuff, and then all I'm gonna give you is these thoughts and prayers.
You know, it's funny because we were talking about resequencing albums a minute ago, and an artist who actually, I think, intentionally tries to get people to resequence his albums is Kendrick Lamar.
Absolutely.
You know, and you know, you talk about prosperity on this versus, you know, peace, and on Rich Spirit, on, you know, Big Step, Mr. Around the Big Steppers, he talks about how thoughts and prayers go way better off timelines.
Mm-hmm.
Now you take it further, like, you know, he's saying, listen, he still believes in thoughts and prayers, but actually do it and don't be public about it. You know what I mean? Are you saying that you don't believe in thoughts and prayers at all, or just that the phrases become empty over time?
It's phrases become empty. You know, a lot of phrases have become empty. That's just the one I got stuck on. You know, I have a policy that if I know you and we communicate via text, phone call, whatever, I won't tell you happy birthday on social media, right? I refuse to do it. Like, I'm not gonna make a big announcement because it's your birthday. I'm gonna call you or text you. If something is happening in your life, I'm gonna call or text you, or at the very worst, DM you. Like, I don't use social media to make these, you know, statements, if you will. And I think that's what Kendrick was getting at, was like, let's live in the real world. And that's kind of what my thing is. It's like, yeah, I pray for people all the time, but I don't make announcements about it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't make, hey guys, guess what? Today I prayed for such and such. You know what I'm saying? I just do it. I just do it in the real world. And that's kind of what that song is. It's like, let's get back to the real world, people. Like, the internet is cool. It made the world smaller. It made you be able to connect with people from all over the world. But let's get back to being present in the real world. And that's, that's, and obviously that's coming from somebody who, I'm not a big social media guy. I have to be on there kind of for what I do, but I'm really not on there a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll say my piece and I'm gone, and I kind of think that's really what that song represented, is like, yo, be present in the world and not online.
So, as we talk about K Dot, 2011 was I consider his breakthrough year. And in the middle of that, Section 80 was one of those albums where I remember where I was the first time I heard it. Very similar to The Listening, like being introduced to Big Pooh's voice. A few months ahead of that, you had Kendrick guested on, rapper Pooh on Fat Boy Fresh Volume 1. He was on there calling himself the 2010 Kool G Rap, which is a great line, as was Ab-Soul. Can you speak about what drew you to them both? Because, I know you're in management and all of that, but that's a tremendous ear and eye for talent before the hype was there.
I wish I could take credit for it, man. Dave Free actually reached out to us via MySpace. And he was reaching out to us about working with J-Rock at the time. J-Rock was signed to Warner still. Mm-hmm. And I went and checked him out because I was the person who answered the MySpace inboxes. And I like what I heard. Like, I'm a big West Coast guy, and he's from the West Coast. He sounded very West Coast. And I was like, yeah, I like this. So I hit him. I reached back, and I ended up going out to LA. Me and Big Doe, who was managing me and Little Brother at the time, ended up going out to LA. And when I went out there, I went to Carson. I pulled up, and I'm thinking I'm just meeting Dave Free and J-Rock. I end up meeting Kendrick and a few other folks. I met Willie B. I didn't meet Ab-Soul at the time, but they had played still one of my favorite records, Ab for President. And I'm just talking, I'm hearing them. I'm like, oh my God, like, y'all got something crazy brewing out here. And so when I came home, I was working on a project at the time with Young RJ, and the song ended up becoming Nothing Less. But originally I sent it for Ab-Soul to get on it. So when Dave Free sent it back, it had Ab-Soul, Kendrick, and J-Rock. And he said, yo, I'm sorry, Pooh. I just wanted to put everybody on there. I said, what are you sorry for? Did you hear what they sent back? And at that point, because I knew Kendrick was the guy who's over there working on the hooks and things of that nature, but we just developed a relationship. And, we went back and forth. Like, I did the Thanksgiving record for Kendrick. I did the Regular Nigga record for Ab-Soul. Then we did Rapper Pooh, and then Schoolboy Q ended up coming in the fold, and we did a record, Fuck Your Hip Hop with Murs. And then me and Ab did another record. But it was just one of them things where I didn't know what they were going to become, but I knew it was something special there, because you could feel it. You could feel it, like the want to be great, the want to be special. It was there. And like I said, I couldn't predict what was going to be, but I knew they were going to end up being something. And I didn't even know it was going to be Kendrick. Like, that was going to end up, I thought it was going to be Ab. I'm like, yo, he got the hair, he got the Lupe / Jay-Z thing going when he rapped, like, and then boom, out of nowhere, Kendrick explodes, and it's like, oh, this is crazy. I still need to talk to Kendrick about them cutting me out of that High Power video. I had a shot in there. They cut me out of that video.
Oh man. Yeah, I remember back in the day, talking to Interscope execs who I won't name, who told me that they thought Schoolboy Q was going to be bigger than Kendrick. I saw both of them at SOBs. Kendrick did it first, and then Q did it, and they were like, nah, man, this guy, he's about to be out of here. So shout out to all of them. They all have had great, successful careers,
Absolutely.
So on what else? You start with a quote about dreaming dreams and then manning up and living those dreams. Mm-hmm. And then I think you attributed to Combat Jack. Was that actually a Combat Jack quote?
That was a Combat Jack quote. That was a quote he said. I think he said at the end of every episode of the Combat Jack show. And it was actually when the producer sent it over to me, it was Combat Jack.
Yeah.
But I didn't have enough time to clear it with his family. So I just said it and then, made sure I attributed that to him as, as his. It wasn't mine. And then I went into the song, but it just represented so much of what this album was about. And I was like, I gotta have it. Even if I can't have it the way it was originally sent to me, I have to have it on here.
Shout out to Reggie, man. I knew Reggie when he had his law firm. We worked together at MTV, and it was great. He was a guy who actually did man up and follow his dreams. To go from being a lawyer to being a respected and successful, on-air personality is pretty impressive. So, what does it take? What does it mean to you to man up and go after what you want?
Don't make excuses. Have discipline. Take that leap every time. It's scary, it's tough, but you got to take that leap every time. And that's what manning up and living those dreams are. You have these ideas, whether you write them down or you just have them in your mind. And a lot of people, fear prevents them from pursuing those dreams. And manning up is whether you're a man or woman or you classify yourself as something else. Manning up and living those dreams is not being afraid to fail, because the only time you fail is when you don't man up and chase those dreams. Failing is not trying. Everything else is just lessons.
And what's it mean to dream in color?
Manning up and living those dreams. That's dreaming in color. When them thoughts become things, when you take action on them things, that's now you're dreaming in color. Anything else is just black and white.
Word. So you've expanded to management in recent years, including Loot and Black Soul. But at the same time, in those recent years, you've made some of the best music of your career. I know you're a pretty avid sports fan, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I liken it to player coach. Like you're doing both things. And I know as an artist, you offer wisdom and perspective to your artists, but does being a manager ever affect your creativity?
Well, I'm more A&R than I am a manager.
Okay.
I have Big Doe, as far as Lou's concerned. Big Doe handles most of his day-to-day on the business side, and I handled A&R, his album, Gold Mouth. With Black Soul, that was more an arrangement. That's my partner, that's my brother, and that was more of an arrangement just to help him, get some of the things done he wanted to get done. And get into some rooms that he couldn't necessarily get into on his own. So having my backing and my reputation, behind him, helped him in some way. But those guys, man, they helped me more than they probably will ever know. And that's just their energy and their, the way they got after it, before, they were jaded from the industry, but that energy was infectious. And anytime I get to work with young guys, that energy is infectious. And it's not like a leech thing where I'm, soaking up their energy, but it's just being able to be around them and see how, it reminds you of how you used to approach things before you became jaded, before you knew too much, before you got to see behind the curtain, that energy that they have. And, and then also working with them allowed me to be creative in a different way. It's like on Loot album, I did a lot on that album that I didn't necessarily take credit for, because it wasn't about that. It was about getting the best album that we could get. So I would come in after he leave, I'll go in with the producer and the engineer and my guy Jay Smash, and we'll sit there and we'll rearrange stuff, we'll move stuff, we'll add stuff and do different things. And a lot of things I was doing, he didn't even know that was me in there. because it wasn't about that. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It was about getting the best version of him that we could get at the time. And that was exciting for me. That was different, but it was exciting. And it allowed me, or it showed me that I could do it. Like I knew I could do it for myself, but being able to transfer that onto somebody else was something that I wasn't necessarily confident that I could do. I believed I could do it, but to actually show myself I could do it, that was a liberating feeling. So shout out to Luke for, trusting me. Because he didn't have to,
Yeah.
he didn't have to trust me at all.
He is huge shout out to Luden. I mean, he's become, as far as AFH, not only one of our favorite artists, within Dreamville, but in hip hop period, the last two albums. And I'm, we hope to have him on this podcast someday, but was there a specific song that made you feel as though, it was worth your investment of your time and your expertise that you heard where you're like, okay, I'm bought in?
Nah, I mean, I've known Luke since 2012. And he did a few features for me early on before we were working in this capacity, but he showed a lot of trust and faith in me early, and then the faith and trust he showed in me by even wanting me to be his manager. You know what I mean? Like when I hadn't managed anybody at the time. And this is with him. I didn't even know, but this is with him already knowing that J. Cole basically was hot on his tail. You know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of people ask me like, yo, that was you who did that? No, I didn't do that. I walked into a situation where when I came in and he told Cole that I was managing him, then the paperwork was presented, but that wasn't because I did anything. It was because, okay, I think for Cole, it was okay, he got somebody, behind him now that I know what it is. But, the admiration and respect that Cole had for him, he got on his own. But I think when I first heard him and I heard his voice and I heard what he was doing and I found out how young he was at the time, I was amazed. And then to understand that he was doing this, him and his friends were doing this, and basically it was like the blind leading the blind. I knew, I was like, yo, if he get somebody behind him that just understands what they're doing, how much further he could go, or how much more advanced he can become as a songwriter and as an artist. And that's where my mind was. It was like, man, if he gets somebody behind him, and I wouldn't even think about me at the time, right? But I was like, if he gets somebody behind him that know what they're doing, oh man, the sky's the limit for that kid. And so it was when I first heard him. It was off the West 96, his first tape, the mixtape. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite artists of the last 5 years, just hands down.
Nice.
The voice penetrates, like you said, his flow is crazy. The content is there. He's a total package, in my opinion. Another one of those guys who, like I put up there, is his label mate, Jit. I'm repping it, today.
Absolutely.
And so we talked about TDE and the movement they built, but what can you say about Dreamville? A label that's got, those two guys, Earth Gang, Kaz, Boss. I mean, just stacked with talent. What do you think about the movement they built?
Man, it's beautiful, man. The one thing I can say, man, I appreciate Cole for signing artists and allowing his artists to be themselves and find their way. And always encouraging them to be them and create from the heart and from the soul. And that's what they champion and foster over at Dreamville. And that's beautiful, because when you have somebody in a position that Cole's in, and with a roster, you want, hey, I need them hits. Most of the times, like, I need them hits. Where them hits at? Yeah. But he has allowed his artists to really find their way organically, and that's beautiful, man. I will always, I have respect for him anyway, but I will always have, a ton of respect for Cole for that, because, forming a label and having your label at a major label, that's normally you're chasing the carrot, and he doesn't have his artist chasing the carrot, and I really respect that. I really respect that.
When you contrast that with those experiences in New York you were talking about, and all those different companies that we know as hip hop fans and think are different offering the same thing, does it ever make you frustrated in contrast to LB's label experiences?
Nah, our experience was our experience. Always say, you can look back and wish you did certain things or some things differently, but at the end of the day, those experiences make you who you are, at this moment. And those experiences allow me to see what I wanted and what I didn't want. And, so I'm always thankful, man. I obviously, you wish some things turned out differently, but like I said, them being what they were allowed me to be who I am today. And without that, ain't no telling where I would be or who I would be.
So, you mentioned that you guys have a documentary coming out in 2023. I saw the trailer.
Mhm.
It looks dope. I want to see it. And I saw a short film. I can't remember who did it. I think it was maybe North Carolina, like educational.
Oh, the arts.
Yeah, I saw
yeah.
those parts like a couple years ago too. So is it called May the Lord Watch?
The documentary is going to be called May the Lord Watch.
Okay.
Um,
So y'all had
but-
the album. Y'all had the album of that title a year or so ago. That's the last time we spoke.
right.
Ninth wasn't part of that. Is he part of the documentary?
You'll see. I don't want to give too much away.
Okay.
It's one of them things. I tell people without saying too much about the doc at this time is it's going to answer a lot of questions that people may have, but it's not going to get so deep in the weeds that somebody who's just discovering Little Brother for the first time via the documentary will be lost. So, we're not going in depth with, so when we was working on the minstrel show and then we got to this song and then we went here and we did this, like it's not necessarily going to be that. But it's still going to answer a lot of questions for the Little Brother fans. And then, like I said, it's going to be a good introduction for those who may be discovering Little Brother for the first time.
Okay. So, we're fans of you and the group, and you mentioned a lot on the album, or a few times, I should say, the rift, do you think it can ever be repaired?
Nah. Well, let me answer this correctly. The rift, at this point, we just understand who each other are. And it's going to be what it's going to be. From May the Lord Watch forward, Little Brother is a duo, and it will be a duo. It will not be a trio again. And so that's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
I know people, or not everybody, but some people like, oh man, I want to, Little Brother, with Ninth Production, like that's not gonna happen. We're beyond that, but it's not like, if I see him, it's gonna be furniture moving. Like, it's not that type of thing. It's just we have a clear understanding of who each other, who we are, and we decided that it was best for us to do our thing over here and he do his thing over there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, y'all all have made great music independently, so yeah, you and Fonte were on the outs for a bit too, but how did y'all mend your relationship?
Talking, man. Like when Fife passed and I reached out, I had to, set my ego and pride to the side, and we got on the phone, and I think the thing that Tay and I did was we put everything on the table. Like, we didn't skip over anything. And we, even at first, and it wasn't like it was just one conversation. It was constant, conversations about things, just, talking about things that happened and why they happened, and where we was, and mentally at the time, and then just understanding as we started going forward and working on Made a Little Watch, just understanding who we are today. You gotta, I think that was a thing that we didn't do early, was take the time to really understand who each other was. And, without that, it leaves a lot of room for misinterpretation. So like I tell people all the time, I like to understand who you are and how you think, not because I want to convince you to agree with me or that you're going to convince me to agree with you. It just allows me to understand how you process things and why you make the decisions you make. So for me, that's the biggest thing. Like, I didn't understand who Tay was at his core when we were younger. So a lot of decisions he made confused me, or they befuddled me. And I'm pretty sure it was the same way for him. But as we worked on Made a Little Watch and we really got to know each other and understand each other, we don't have those same problems. And we also have an open line of communication where I'm not afraid of stepping on his toes or offending him. It's, if I see something, I say something, and vice versa. Or if I have an issue, I express it like, hey man, this, or, or if one of us feel we may have stepped on somebody's toes, we immediately, hey, I didn't mean this way or whatever. And so we have that understanding now as we've gotten to know each other, really gotten to know each other, versus when we were younger, we just had a common general goal, and it was working out the way it was working out, and we were bonded by the experience of going through this thing together. Now we're bonded by knowing who each other are. So
You talked earlier about how time sharpens your pen. I think it helps to sharpen understanding sometimes too, and perspective on things
oh
too.
yeah, man, that time is, maturity. It definitely allows you to understand things from a different perspective
Yeah.
as you get older, and it allows you to, I say, slow down mentally. You start to see things in slow motion versus when you're young, everything is coming at the speed of light. But when you get older, it's like the game slow down for you. It's like an NBA vet. You know what I mean? Like, I can see 5 moves ahead now. When I was younger, I couldn't. I just only saw what was right in front of me. I saw the play in front of me. That's it. So now, you're not in a rush. You have a better understanding, and you're more solid.
So, we talked about the labels experience you had back then too, and how they were uniform. You're hearing the same thing from everyone. But at the time, there was very little choice. It was kind of like the major way. It was really, really hard path to be independent. Now it's a totally different story. You got all sorts of options, digital. You can go straight to Spotify, whatever you need for your distribution. How do you think it would have changed things for Little Brother? The story would have been different had you guys come out now versus when you did?
Yeah. Well, no, well, it would have been different, but I don't think in a good way. I think coming out when we did, uh, it allowed us to cut through in a way that I don't think would be capable now, because it's so much. We were at the forefront of being discovered on the internet, and while that didn't turn us into quote unquote superstars, if you will, it allowed us to cut through a lot of noise, because it was like, who's this group from North Carolina that people are talking about on the internet? And that's what got us into a lot of meetings and a lot of rooms, because people were curious. Where now it's different. Like, yeah, you can get discovered on the internet, but you got to go viral, or you got to, have your numbers going crazy, whether by hook or crook. and you know, just all those things that we're not about. So I yeah, I don't think I think now would be way different for us. I think we would probably have a harder time now getting heard through all of the noise versus back then. Plus, we came at a time when we came out, it was after the raucous era. So we were too late to be mentioned with the Qualies and the Most Defs and the Commons and you know the Roots and all those guys. But we helped open the door for the Kendricks, for you know the J. Cole's and so forth and so the Wale's and so forth and so on. So you know, we just came at a place where we were too early and too late at the same time. But like I said, it still allowed us to cut through.
I agree with you too, and I mean, pun intended. But like, you came in an era where there was time for the listening. You know, like where people bought CDs, and that was the one CD you had in your car in your Discman,
Right.
and that makes a difference. Like, I
Yep.
think the connection people have to your lyrics, collectively and individually, that's just a different era, and that was a cool era. You know.
Absolutely. I mean, they 20 years later, coming up on 20 years later, they still, you know, people are still getting put onto the listening. They're still talking about the listening. They're still discovering things about the listening. And that's a beautiful thing to see and a beautiful thing to be a part of. And like I said, I wouldn't have wanted it any other way.
So one of the more interesting trends right now in hip hop is this kind of walk away from materialism. Like, we all want a nice car, we like a nice watch, you know, good roof over our heads, but you know, artists like Jay-Z talking about, you know, on Story of OJ, of what he could have done in Dumbo. And, you know, on down. Everyone seems to have their story. And you have a song on this album that's really interesting to me, LS 400. You alluded to it a few moments ago. And it's like a complex song, because on one hand, you know, it's an ode to a car that, you know, was a luxury car at its time. But then you have like some really interesting kind of emotional sentiments in there where you say, you know, I learned a lot about people when the Lexus got sold. And I know you later mentioned that, you know, you got another foreign that you're also proud of. But can you speak to the impact of that line and the lessons learned from achieving a dream, but also realizing something about that dream?
Yeah, it's for me, it was not knowing who I was. So and not having confidence in who I was. So I believe that I believed that material things would give me the confidence that I didn't have internally. And what I realized, what I came to realize was that's not what happens at all, right?
Mm.
You know, you can have these things. You can have, like, I had the LS 400. I had jerseys, throwback jerseys and polos and all these things, but I didn't feel any more confident, you know what I mean, than I did without it. And then I realized for me, that wasn't who I was at all. Like, I don't wear jewelry to this day. I don't, you know, care about having name brand clothes to this day. I don't, like, none of that stuff really concerns me. That doesn't make me who I am. And that was really what the LS 400 represented for me.
Mm.
It was realizing that things doesn't make me confident. You know, confidence comes from within, not, you know, from the material things that I possessed. And once I started to realize that, I started to get rid of those material things. Because, you know, who said it? LaRussell. Shout out to LaRussell Vallejo. Somebody asked him, was like, yeah, man, I don't see you wearing chains or jewels. He was like, I am the jewels. and I thought that was so brilliant. And I was like, yeah, that's yeah, I am the jewels. So shout out to LaRussell for that.
That's dope. You know, so on both this album, you know, on the song What Else, and also on May the Lord Watch, I think on Right on Time, you talk about swallowing your pride and driving Uber to pay the bills.
Right.
You know? So in a world where MCs are bragging about money they don't even actually have, where do you get the courage to keep it all the way real like that?
Man, I just wanted to be honest for these kids, or, you know, the youth coming up, man. And the one thing I realized was that we, and I'm saying we in a general sense, but we praise guys talking about, having to do things or doing things illegally to make money, right? We praise these guys, but when somebody, or we find out an artist has a job, or an artist is working, we kind of shame them. And I'm like, that's fucking backwards. You know what I mean? Like, you should be cheering for the guy that's going out and securing an honest living, because nothing is guaranteed in this music business. This is probably the worst business to be a part of. You know what I mean? Nothing is guaranteed. A lot of these people don't have money that you think they have, and they're doing other things, whether legal or illegal, to make ends meet, right? And I was like, you know what? I can't be ashamed to talk about what I had to do or what I decided to do in order to make sure my bills were still paid and I still put food on the table. And these young people need to hear that. They need to know that it's okay, that while you're chasing this dream, while you're following this dream, you got a job, to make sure, you have a baseline of some sort. That's okay. It's all right. You're not gonna decide to be a rapper today and tomorrow, you worth 100 million. Like, you lucky if you make it to 100,000. I think we're trained to look at all these exceptions and think they're the rule. I read something, and this a microcosm for just this industry period, but I read something, or somebody told me something about Spotify, how 80% or 70 to 80% of the artists on Spotify only have average 10 monthly listeners. 10, not 10,000, 10. So that means 25 to 20% is the big number guys that we hear, right? But we're told that the big number that's normal. That's not normal. And I'm trying to break them stereotypes. It's like, what you see those are exceptions. Those are not the rule. What I'm talking about is the rule. Like, and I just felt it was important that, I spoke about that and I expressed that, because I've had artists hit me, whether in DM or ones that I know text me, or when I see them out and they say, yo, man, thank you. Like, they've been saying it since right on time. Like, yo, thank you, man. Thank you for telling my story. And it's like, wow. Like, and to think I almost took that line out of that. Well, attempted to take that line out of that song. Fonte said he wouldn't allow me to take it out. He didn't let me record something. And then when I heard the album, it would have still been in there, because he knew how important it was for people to hear that. And he also knew how important it was for me to express that, because what it ended up doing was allowing me to be more free and expressing my truth. And now I understand. Like, I was scared, like before that Right on Time came out, I was scared before To Dream in Color dropped, because I was giving so much away. But now I understand, like, that's when you on the right path, when you scared. Like,
it brought me closer as a listener to you, and it reminded me of that news story in the last 5 years where I can't think of the actor's name, but it played Elvin on the Cosby Show, and somebody snapped a photo of him working at Trader Joe's, and like, ah ha ha, and lo and behold, I mean, Ambrosia, we covered the story, Reggie, not a month later he was on Billions, because people relate to that. And I'm curious, that was 3 years ago. You took that chance, you and Fonte, when it was your words, your story on May the Lord Watch. Do you think 3 years later, that pressure to keep up appearances is changing in hip hop?
A little bit. I think social media kind of, has that going at a snail's pace. Because now it's not pressure to keep appearances in hip hop, it's pressure to keep up appearances on Instagram. You know what I mean? You got influencers and artists and whoever. But hopefully, my story and my songs and things that I'm saying is helping to, break them walls down a little bit. I know at least the artists I talk to and deal with, I tell them, I say, look, man, ain't no shame in going out and, either having a job or having a little side hustle. Like, you're not gonna come into this thing making big money. You be lucky if you ever make big money. But, at least until you don't have to work, until somebody's paying you to just work on music, man, go get that job.
Right.
Like, you still got to live, you still got to eat. Don't be worried about no chains and no foreigns and shit like that if you can't put food in your mouth. You know what I mean? I ain't talking about McDonald's. Well, all this shit is expensive now, but don't matter where you eat, it's expensive. But yeah, like, what's more important, looking good for the gram or actually being good in real life? What's more important? And those are the conversations that I have, and I just decided to put them in music form.
Even when you so-called make it, right? Like, I've always heard that multiple revenue streams is the key to wealth anyway,
Absolutely.
It's interesting too. You talked about people celebrating drug money and things like that, but shaming people who are going out and getting it in other ways. I would say that applies even for those exceptions of people who have exceptional wealth in hip hop, like Jay-Z. We just talked about this on an episode of our show a couple of weeks ago about how Jay was celebrated for hustling and like making money in the crack game. But when he starts talking about his corporate enterprises and things like that, like, he's out of touch and shame for it. So the whole thing is kind of backwards,
I got a theory on that, man. I don't think that's necessarily just the people. I think we're being programmed to think that way. And it's unfortunate a lot of people fall for that trap, but I think it's programming. I don't think they, and when I say they, I think we all know who we talking about here, but I think we're being programmed to champion, illicit behavior versus legal, honest behavior. Mm-hmm. And, I'm just wise enough to understand and know the difference, right? Like, I'm not going to fall into the trap, even though I fell into the trap a little bit, you know what I mean? Like, by not wanting to, being afraid to disclose, you know what I mean? That I went out and, substitute taught and drove Uber or whatever. And like I said, now I'm trying to help break that. Like, I'm trying to help, kids or youth or people coming up understand, like, there's nothing wrong with making an honest living. Do what you need to do to make sure you can put food on the table or you can have a roof over your head. I don't give a shit who laughs at you. Because guess what? They ain't participating in you being able to afford to live. And that's the thing we got to understand. It's like, you may talk crazy about me because I drove Uber, but you weren't putting money in my pocket, so I didn't have to drive Uber. So what are we talking about? Like, what are we talking about here?
So one hustle that was legitimate when we were younger, and it sounds like you and I both participated in this hustle, was the BMG Music Club.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that on God's Grace. You remember some of the CDs you got as part of that club?
Man, I don't, but I got a lot. I had a lot. That's how I heard Jay-Z for the first time. That's, I probably got my Biggie CD that way. Ready to Die. I was getting all type of stuff, man. I was just going through checking boxes, and anything that was rap or R&B I was getting. Me and my brother, we both was pulling the hustle. Yeah. And we will each get 10 CDs, and I think I did it about 3 or 4 times where I was able to finesse it and get CDs. But thank you, BMG, for
shout out to Columbia House.
Yeah, for that hustle. Because I don't even know. I think it was like 10 CDs for a cent, but you were supposed to like get magazines or something. And listen, I thank y'all. Y'all allowed me to really flourish in discovering music by presenting that offer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that's how I got Hard to Earn Gangstar, which to this day is one of, if not my favorite hip hop album. I know you shouted out Moment of Truth on your album, Pooh. So
Oh yeah, it was a year thing. It was I was talking about
98.
1998. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So it was a
Yes,
year
sir.
thing. Yeah.
So we just have a couple more questions for you, but Reggie and I regularly speak about hip hop crews, and we were recently talking about the Justice League, which reunited a few weeks ago for the first time in a dozen years.
Mhm.
And I'm curious on how you look back and perceive that collective of talent.
I think Cesar Comanche said it best in a recent interview. He was talking about how you have 15 guys who all come from different places, don't know each other, and we all collectively meet from some shape, form, or fashion, and we doing that good old boom bap. And people were telling us that ain't gonna work. It's not gonna happen. What are y'all doing? Especially in North Carolina. And we stuck to our guns and we made it happen. And I look back on those times and I wish we had better organization, better leadership. We probably could have done a lot more as a collective if we did, but I think the collective served its collective purpose at that time. And I appreciate all them guys for coming out and joining me on stage and celebrating not just my album release, but just celebrating, the Justice League. It was fun, man. That was a fun show. I really enjoyed, Median, Leg, Sean Boog, Comanche, Edgar Allan Flow, Sean Don, he was DJing for me, and he did some raps. Tay came out and he missed the, Tay don't like going in buildings right now still, and he still came out and did a couple records. And Joe Scudder was there, even though he wasn't officially part of the Justice League, he was there. And so it was beautiful, man. That was probably some of the most fun I had on stage in a long time.
That's great to hear. And shout out to Cesar. I got to do a press bio for him a lifetime and a half ago. But I wanted to ask you, I mean, you're a hip hop fan. So outside of, LB and your solo work, what is one Justice League release, from the J League, any artist or group that every hip hop head should hear if they haven't?
Legacy.
Okay.
Shit. I think his second album was Suicide Music. Yeah, them first two albums, man, them legacy albums, man. Leg was a prolific writer, and he just had a unorthodox kind of flow, but it still flowed like kind of right. Man, going back listening, like I went back and listened to some of his records before we had that show, and I was like, man, I didn't even really understand what was going on here. Like I knew he was nice, but to really go back and you just go over them records, man, like he was really saying some shit. So definitely Legacy, man. That was, like I said, going back revisiting the albums now, man, his really stick out to
me. So, one last thing I want to ask you is, you said earlier you're an avid sports fan, and is there an athlete in any sport that rapper Big Pooh can draw a comparison from?
Dennis Scott.
Okay.
That was my guy. I always like Dennis Scott. Some people's like, oh, he's a 3-point specialist, right? But Dennis Scott was like a glue guy. 3-point was his specialty, but he was a glue guy in the sense, like he made things work better. Like he spaced the floor for a Shaq and a Nick Anderson to do their thing, and a Penny. And that was kind of like me. Like you knew who I was, but I was like unassuming in the collective. But what I did was important for the collective. And so I think Dennis Scott, man. Shout out to Dennis Scott.
He drained a lot of clutch threes too, you know.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, so on Broken Dreams, you said ego is a blade that will slice you up real proper from the insides. That one hit me. Can you talk a little bit more about that one?
Yeah, that was speaking from just two things actually. One, it was the work thing. Just that, like, it took me a long time to set my pride and ego to the side and go, get a job or go hustle, whatever. But also just from a relationship standpoint. Part of the reason why Tay and I didn't speak for as long as we did, I know at least on my end, was ego. It was, I ain't saying nothing to him till he say something to me. It was that type of thing. And that was all ego. You know what I mean? That was ego and pride. And that was kind of what I was talking about, was just like how, even though it was hurting me that I didn't have my brother, you know what I'm saying? Like something happened, I couldn't call my brother, this guy that we done went through the trenches together. My ego was saying, nah, fam, don't call him until he call you. Don't talk to him until he talk to you. And we probably could have, got over whatever our issues were, few years before we actually did, if I just put my ego to the side, which I ended up doing when I found out Fife passed. That was me putting my ego to the side. And once I did that, within 3 days, we was on the phone. And I was just like, shit, it was that easy, like, or that simple. So that's kind of that line kind of represented both things, just in a relationship form and then, just in the life form.
So, I want to end on this, because on that same song, you said that there was a point where you thought you were done rapping, but here we are today talking about, a really dope album. So obviously you continued. So what would you say to all those out there who are trying to man up, and live their dreams, whose dreams might feel broken? What would you say to them to keep going in those times when they feel like they can't?
Just got to learn how to adjust, learn how to adapt, and learn how to pivot. And when you're young, you don't necessarily know how to do those things. You think there's only one way to skin a cat when you're young. It's like, my dream looks this way, so if it's not happening this way, it's not my dream. That's not how it works. We don't get to determine our path. All we can do is move forward. And that's something that I had to learn, was that my path wasn't going to be a straight line. It was going to have all types of turns and twists and loops, and, got to double back and then go forward and then double back again. Like, that's life. And once I understood that, I was able to really step back into music with the proper perspective. And I can thank my brother Rich for that. I call him my mentor, and he prefers that we call each other brothers, but he allowed me to really look at things. He helped me change my perspective on a lot of things just by really just talking to me and showing me things, or explaining to me things that I didn't really have the proper perspective on. And a lot of those conversations when we met in 2013, the things he was saying would happen ended up happening. And it's amazing. I was like, bro, you saw the future. And he was like, nah, I just understand how this thing works. And so I definitely credit him for helping me to really put things in the proper perspective when I was at that point where I wanted to really walk away from it all.
That's dope. Shout out to Rich. Rapper Big Pooh. The album is To Dream in Color, available on all streaming platforms now. Is on vinyl. You got physical copies out there too?
We got the vinyl coming. I actually just got off the phone with Rich before I got on with y'all. I'm gonna do something special for the vinyl. you know, people they bullied me into doing this vinyl. So I'm gonna do a limited. It's gonna be limited. Probably about between 200-300 pieces, numbered, signed, and I'm gonna do something special. I'm gonna put my goal is to put 2 tracks that you only can get on vinyl. And those gonna be on the limited pieces of vinyl. And then once they done, they done. And I'll probably do some CDs as well, but they won't have the bonuses on them. So
So
yeah.
may the Lord watch the documentary coming in 2023, March or so, early 2023.
Probably we probably looking about spring.
Okay.
You know, we also celebrating 20 years of the listening in February, in the February 2023. So you know, the documentary will come a little bit after that.
Okay. And you going on tour for the album?
Yeah, we got some dates planned. We gonna have an announcement coming up very soon. We got a couple dates. We probably gonna lock some more in once we get a good idea when the documentary coming, but we do got some coming very soon. So you expect that announcement in another week or 2.
Okay, awesome.
Dope. Man.
Thank you for your time and thank you for the music.
Thank y'all, man. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
All right, man.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right.
Peace.
Peace.
Peace.